Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Richard Kiyosaki is a best-selling book that has become the #1 personal finance book of all time. In the book, Kiyosaki seeks to describe the lessons about money that rich fathers teach their children versus the teachings of poor and middle-class families. Moreover, Kiyosaki uses personal anecdotes from his poor dad, his real father, a hard-working man who couldn't seem to make ends meet, and his rich dad, his mentor, a middle school dropout turned millionaire, to show how people must challenge their view of money to find richness, even if they don't earn a high income. Telling the compelling stories of two fathers, Kiyosaki frames the path to financial success. Having been translated into multiple languages and having sold over 36 million copies across the world, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a powerful book that has changed the way many people view financial freedom and financial education. This book shows a new point of view to finances that many people have not been taught. Using this information, Kiyosaki was able to retire before he turned 50. Ultimately, this book debunks several myths and suggests that everyone can have financial security if they use the knowledge outlined in this book. This audio captures the key takeaways found in the original book. All fluff and unnecessary information has been removed to save you hours of time. If you've already read the original, this audio will help you cement the most important lessons. If you haven't, don't worry. Here you will find all the practical information that you can apply. However, we do encourage you to purchase the original as well for a more comprehensive understanding of the subject. Sharon L. Lecter ponders whether school properly educates children on the route to financial security. As a child, Lecter was taught to study and work hard so that she could get into a good school and get a secure, high-paying job. She chose to be a CPA. Her husband, Michael, was taught the same lessons from his family. They both graduated with honors from college and commenced successful careers. They got married and happily started a family, but upon a conversation with her son, Lecter realized that the values she had been taught would no longer ensure financial safety. Her son began talking about how he didn't need a good education, pointing to people like Michael Jordan and Bill Gates who were wealthy despite not taking the route Lecter was taught was necessary to do well. Lecter realized that her son was right, and that grades and a good education no longer carried the same safety that they did for children of the previous generations. For example, doctors no longer made the same amount of money as they once did, and the old advice of working hard and getting an education no longer worked in the rapidly changing world. Accordingly, Lecter discovered a profound lack of education in personal finance at schools. She realized that many schools did not even provide basic courses on how investment, credit cards, taxes, and budgeting functioned. Thus, young people rising through the ranks didn't know how to be rich, which led them to what Kiyosaki calls the rat race throughout the book. With the plight of the financially ignorant generations on her mind, Lecter was introduced to Richard Kiyosaki, a businessman, by her husband. She was drawn in by an educational game that Kiyosaki had created. In the game, there were 2 tracks, Rat Race and Fast Track. Fast Track represented the path that rich people took, the one that leads to financial peace, while Rat Race represented the typical way people were programmed, to succeed at school to in turn get a secure job. In the rat race, people graduate from college and they begin to work hard in careers, but then they fall in love, and as they start families, they must work even harder to keep the cash flow up. Sometimes they must take on second jobs or go back to school for more training. They must save for their children's education, and ultimately, the next generation will also get stuck in the rat race. To escape the rat race, people must understand the concepts of accounting and investment. One day, Lecter played Kiyosaki's education game with a diverse group of people. Her table included her 19-year-old daughter, a banker, a business owner, and a computer programmer. That evening, Lecter was the only one to escape the rat race despite the distinguished company she kept. It made sense to Lecter that her young daughter would struggle a little with basic financial tasks, but to see highly educated and career-oriented people not understand these concepts was striking. With the game came the beginning of a working relationship between Lecter and Kiyosaki, who told Lecter about the book he had written and his ideas on the issue of the financial miseducation of the younger generations. Kiyosaki worried about the increasing gap between the rich and the poor, and as he spoke to Lecter, he began to tell the story of his two dads, the father who raised him and the mentor who taught him about how the rich operated. His first dad was part of the rat race, while the other was wealthy. Kiyosaki tells the stories of these two fathers, interweaving their tales throughout the book to show you how to find financial freedom and the fast track. Kiyosaki had two fathers. Both were successful, but one worried about finances all his life, while the other was one of the richest men in Hawaii and left millions of dollars to his family. The first was highly educated, graduated college in 2 years and got a PhD and a respectable career. His other father didn't even finish 8th grade, but still made a rich life for himself. Both men offered Kiyosaki advice and each encouraged education, but the course of study they suggested varied based on their life philosophies. Kiyosaki says he benefited from having the guidance of two dads instead of just one, because they gave him the perspectives of both a rich man and a poor man. Accordingly, he didn't reject either man's guidance in its entirety. Instead, he picked the lessons that seemed fitting as he made his decisions. He says, the problem was, the rich man was not yet rich, and the poor man not yet poor. Thus, growing up, Kiyosaki was inadvertently exposed to incredibly contrasting views of money. One problem Kiyosaki raises is that personal finances are taught at home rather than at school. The education system does not prioritize financial education, and instead strives to teach professional skills. He worries that future generations won't be able to handle their own money because they've never been taught how money functions and the healthy attitudes to have towards it. Kiyosaki loved both fathers and acknowledges that each had lessons to offer him. One father would say that they didn't have money for a certain object, while the other would ponder how they could work that object into the budget. The latter method allows the brain to think the problem through and potentially find solutions. In the process, the brain's skills are increased. The former doesn't improve the brain's ability to deal with money problems. Further, each man had different views on social welfare, taxes, and education. One didn't like to talk about money, while the other encouraged business talk at home. At 9 years old, Kiyosaki decided that when it came to money, he would listen to his rich dad over that of his brilliant and educated one. For 30 years after that, Kiyosaki's rich dad would teach him 6 lessons about wealth, which Kiyosaki now shares with readers. Lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. In 1956, when Kiyosaki was 9 years old, he asked his father how to get rich. In response, his father asked him why he would want to be rich, and Kiyosaki replied that he and one of his friends, Mike, weren't invited to go on a trip with a boy named Jimmy because they were poor. Kiyosaki happened to live in a town where the well-off kids went to the same elementary school that he did. Kiyosaki's father was quiet for a while, before finally admitting that he didn't know exactly what made a person rich. But he said that Kiyosaki needed to learn what it took to make money. After that conversation, Kiyosaki went to his best friend Mike, and they vowed to make money together. They began collecting discarded toothpaste tubes from neighbors, and since toothpaste tubes were made from lead back then, they melted the lead down and tried to make nickels out of it. Kiyosaki's father laughed at their antics and had to explain that what they were doing was illegal. However, he also commended them for their efforts and suggested the boys talk to Mike's dad, who was known for making money. That is when Kiyosaki's money-making lesson commenced. Mike's dad made Kiyosaki a deal. In exchange for lessons on how to be rich, Kiyosaki would have to work and learn through experience because teaching as if it were school, lecturing, would slow down Kiyosaki's learning. Kiyosaki began making 10 cents an hour and chose to take his rich dad's offer. It didn't take long before Kiyosaki wanted to quit, which his rich dad had been expecting. Kiyosaki demanded better pay because he felt that his rich dad wasn't teaching him anything. He felt that his rich dad was the cause for his disenchantment. Rich Dad countered by explaining that just because he wasn't teaching through lectures didn't mean he wasn't teaching. Rich Dad then explained that Kiyosaki should not give up when life pushed him around, and that those who blame their jobs, low wages, or bosses for their problems do not get rich. Those who take no risks and do what is expected of them do not get rich. Rich Dad purposely pushed Kiyosaki to teach the first lesson of being rich. The poor work for money, while the rich let money work for them. Rich Dad pointed out how Kiyosaki's dad made a good amount of money but still couldn't pay his bills. This was because he worked hard for his money but didn't understand how money worked. Then Rich Dad told Kiyosaki that he would now be paid nothing for his 3 hours of work because that is how he would learn not to work for money. For 3 weeks, Mike and Kiyosaki worked without pay, and Rich Dad sat them down for another chat. Working up from 20 cents, he told the boys that he could pay them up to $5 an hour, trying to tempt the boys into giving in to a high price, but they resisted the lucrative offer. Rich Dad then explained how the fear of being broke often convinces people to act, clouding their judgment. From there, those people get caught up in a pattern of working and paying bills, the rat race. People also let their desires, or greed, impede their ability to be rich. To break from this cycle, Rich Dad said that the boys had to be truthful with how they were feeling so that they could stop fearing the absence of money. By separating emotions, people can detach their feelings from their financial thinking. Too many people let money control their emotions, leading money to take over everything they do. This is not the mentality of the rich father. Even some rich people get caught up in the pursuit of money. They keep working tirelessly in fear that they will lose their wealth. Even worse, the Rich Dad explained, are those who say they are not interested in money, but who still work 8 hours a day. Those people are caught by their fear and desire, which keeps them stuck in financial distress, even if they are making a lot of money. Rich Dad explained to the boys that they needed to use their brains, and not their emotions, to make money decisions. He warned them of the allure of a new toy, or the fear of being penniless, because those thoughts often lead to anxiety around money, which causes people to let money become their only motivation. Rich Dad compared raises and bonuses to waving a carrot in front of a donkey. Unlike the carrot, however, money isn't real. It's a societal construct. Under the illusion that money is real, people often miss out on opportunities because they are invested in job security and other comforting factors that they are convinced will give them financial security. Unfortunately, these false impressions often lead people astray and run them through a constant loop in the rat race. After learning this first lesson, Kiyosaki and Mike wanted to make money. They came up with the idea to start a comic book library. Using Mike's studious sister as a librarian, they'd charge each child who wanted to read a comic book 10 cents during a 2-hour reading window. They made over $9 a week in their first 3 months. They learned how hard it was to have a business, and had their first foray into making money. Further, this endeavor was Kiyosaki's first experience of having his money work for him. Lesson 2. Why teach financial literacy? Both boys benefited from Rich Dad's teachings. Mike grew up to take over his father's business and improved upon his father's efforts. Kiyosaki was able to retire at the age of 47. Though, to Kiyosaki, retirement only means that he has the choice to work or not work, so he still does do work. Now, though, he has financial freedom. Others do not have his same freedom, so Kiyosaki worries that as there are economic booms and busts, people will prioritize money to solve their problems, rather than keeping their minds open to the changes of the world. Kiyosaki says, "It's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep." That is, winning the lottery doesn't help you much if you just lose the money again. To be rich, you must understand money so that you can maintain your wealth. People must build a strong financial foundation, or their wealth will crumble. Kiyosaki's rich dad made him financially literate, which then allowed him to have a strong foundation to make and keep his money. His rich father drew him illustrations and defined crucial terms, which Kiyosaki briefly shares with the readers in this chapter. The first important idea to know is the difference between an asset and a liability. This rule is the only rule. Those who are rich collect assets, while those in the lower classes have piles, sometimes mountains, of liabilities. Assets cannot be established by words. Rather, they are distinguished from liabilities by numbers. As the rich dad always said, in accounting, it's not the numbers, but what the numbers are telling you. It's just like words. It's not the words, but the story the words are telling you. Many people can look at financial statements, but they often cannot understand them, which makes it hard to differentiate between assets and liabilities. In short, assets put money into your pocket, while liabilities take money out of your pocket. The concept is simple. Buying assets will make you rich, while buying liabilities will make you poor. Kiyosaki uses examples of financial documents such as income statement and the balance sheet. You can chart your cash flow and judge what items will add and subtract cash from that flow. A poor person may have liabilities like credit cards and loans, while having no assets such as stocks, bonds, real estate, or intellectual property. Rich people will have assets and few liabilities. Accordingly, simply having more money does not solve people's problems because without assets, that money will inevitably be squandered. Thus, people are driven to work harder, but they do not have the skills to manage their money, so their work does not give them an advantage. Imagine a young couple who decide to move in together. They combine their lives into one apartment, but the apartment is small, so they want to expand and buy a house. They want to have kids, so they save money for their dream house. They advance through the ranks at their jobs and get paid more, but they are hit with the top expense many people have: taxes. They are taxed on their earnings, and when they buy a house, they are taxed for their property too. They need furniture and appliances for their sparkly new home, and they need a new car as the old one wears out. The expenses are adding up for the couple, and now they have a heap of liabilities, the rat race. They have to work even harder because they have even more expenses. They have credit cards, loans, and interest on those loans, and they just can't seem to stay ahead of all the money they must spend to keep up their lifestyles. This couple is representative of many young couples who inadvertently get caught up in the rat race. Money becomes the force in control of people's lives. The lower classes become indebted to that power, and they are told to stay away from risks, the exact risks that could get them out of their dreadful cycle of working and not earning enough. They must break free of trying to stay in line with the neighbors, and must start forging their own paths. Mike and Kiyosaki got into trouble in school as they resisted the normal expectations society has for kids. Do well in school to be successful. They understood money in a way that most people didn't. Kiyosaki would even get into fights about money with his poor dad when he was only 16. His poor dad thought that a house was a great investment, while his rich dad deemed a house a liability because of the debt that comes with it. Kiyosaki argued to his dad that people tend to spend their whole careers trying to pay for a house that they don't own. Plus, people move homes, so they get new loans to pay off. Further, the tax deduction of mortgage interest doesn't even out compared to other expenses people have. Property taxes persist even as the home is paid off, which can cause financial strain, especially for retirees. Houses also aren't guaranteed to rise in value. Most importantly, if you're investing a good chunk of your money into a home, you'll miss other opportunities that could go into your asset column, such as education and the growth of other assets. Even members of the middle class will have constant financial woes. As their incomes go up, so will their costs. They will have more liabilities and not more assets, which prohibits them from improving their situations. People aren't taking risks, and they are losing many opportunities to make money in the process. Thus, you need to try to increase your assets while getting rid of your liabilities, because you cannot live a rich life if you only have expenses. Lesson 3. Mind your own business. Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, spoke to an MBA class in 1974. On this occasion, he asked the students to guess what business he was in. At first, they all laughed because it seemed obvious that he was in the food business. But he was very serious about his question and explained that he was not in the hamburger business, but in the real estate business. When opening his hamburger franchises, Kroc kept in mind where he was buying real estate. In the 90s, McDonald's was the largest single owner of real estate in the whole world. It wasn't just the hamburger stands that were important, but also the land beneath those franchises. Again, this speaks to the idea that assets are critical to being rich. If you are a banker, for example, and say that you don't own the bank you work at, then banking is your profession and not your business. Kroc's profession was McDonald's franchises, but his business was obtaining assets, the incredibly valuable real estate he bought. Unfortunately, schooling often focuses on the profession rather than the business. If you go to law school, you become a lawyer, or if you learn about education, you become a teacher. But often, people do not have businesses of their own. They work for other people. They involve themselves in other businesses and are left desperate for promotions and raises. If you want financial security, you must have a business of your own. You need to build your own assets, but unfortunately, during financial troubles, people often sell their assets thinking that they can get some quick cash when, really, they aren't getting the true value when they sell their assets because of taxes. Having a business of your own doesn't mean you should quit your job. It simply means that you need to build up your stack of assets and decrease your liabilities. Try to reduce your expenses and build your assets before you make any major life changes. Don't change your lifestyle until you have paid your debts. Many people make the mistake of winding up all their money in loans and credit cards. But living that way is not sustainable and is often a trap. As reiterated throughout the book, a strong financial foundation can go a long way in bringing you financial freedom. Kiyosaki breaks assets into the following categories: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, income-generating real estate, notes, IOUs, royalties from intellectual property like music, scripts, patents, etc., and all other things that have value, produce income, or have a market. As a child, Kiyosaki was encouraged by his dad to find a safe job. His rich dad encouraged him to get assets that he was passionate about. As a result, because he loves land, Kiyosaki collects real estate. He also loves to obtain stocks from small companies. He has different strategies for each of these areas, and while there is some risk involved, he chooses his assets based on his passions and research. You too should build assets in a way that satisfies you, and you should keep the stack of assets as large as possible. As your cash flow increases, you can then consider adding more luxuries as a pat on the back for your investments. It can take years for assets to pay off, but in the end, you'll be liberated. Some people buy luxuries on credit, but these luxuries will cause anxiety because of the debt they cause. Therefore, it's better to invest in your business and wait for the payoff. Lesson 4. The history of taxes and the power of corporations. Kiyosaki says that the romanticized ideal of Robin Hood has caused problems for the poor and the middle class. It is not the rich that pay for social welfare, but the middle class who carry the tax burden. Kiyosaki's rich dad explained that once upon a time in England, there were no taxes except when needed for wars. Napoleon's reign meant the English had to have taxes as they prepared for battle. The same was true in America during the Civil War. Both countries eventually adopted permanent taxes. Historically, though, only the wealthy were taxed. The poor were convinced that taxes were good because taxes were advertised to take money away from the rich. However, the taxes wound up hurting the lower classes. The idea of taxes being the poor and middle classes' Robin Hood was tantalizing, and eased these vulnerable classes into a false sense of security. Kiyosaki's rich dad explained that when tax laws were passed, the government got greedy and kept wanting more money. Thus, while Kiyosaki's poor dad was a government bureaucrat, his rich dad considered himself a capitalist. His poor dad didn't want to raise taxes on the rich, while his rich dad thought government workers were a pack of lazy thieves. Meanwhile, the wealthy were already starting to invest in corporations, ensuring that they didn't have to play by the same rules as everyone else. Corporations allowed the wealthy to limit their risks. When taxes began, people were satisfied, as government operations began to churn. The wealthy and government employees benefited, but bureaucratic policies meant that departments had to spend all their money. Otherwise, they would lose it when the new budget rolled out. Thus, the government got caught up in a rat race of its own. More money was needed to keep it afloat, so the lower classes had to chip in. Meanwhile, those with financial information began corporations that kept the wealth in the hands of the wealthy, while the poor paid for the government operations. The divide between the rich and the poor continues to be profound. While taxes were meant to punish those with wealth, the rich had and still have the assets they need to find ways out of playing by the rules. They have information on tax rules that the poor simply don't have. Thus, the poor are not able to escape their tax burden, even if they don't have the means to pay them. The rich have the power to pay as little as possible. Kiyosaki's father told him to work his way up the corporate ladder, while his rich father asked, "Why not own the ladder?" As Kiyosaki began a high-paying job at Xerox, he became discontent when he saw all the deductions in his paycheck, and contemplated the people he was making rich with his work. Accordingly, he began collecting his own assets, minding his own business. By having interests of his own, he became a better employee because he had a focus. He wanted to stop working for other people, so he worked hard to escape the rat race. Finally, in under 3 years, his real estate assets became more valuable than his income from Xerox. His financial IQ gave him the insight he needed to build assets and buy his first Porsche. A financial IQ is made up of 4 areas. The first is accounting, which can also be referred to as financial literacy. As you become responsible for more money, this becomes more important. It is the skill to read and comprehend financial documents. Another important area of financial IQ is investments, or money making money. This skill requires strategies, formulas, and, yes, creativity. Thirdly, you need to understand how markets function. The market is very emotionally driven. For instance, the Tickle Me Elmo toy enthusiasm of Christmas 1996 shows how emotions play a role in the market. People frantically tried to get their hands on the Elmo toy. Because of high demand, scalpers would buy the toy and then sell it for ever higher prices. For whatever reason, the demand was high, and because of limited supply, the demand became even higher as everyone tried to get their hands on the must-have toy of the year. Finally, the final element of financial IQ is the law. Those who know the tax laws, for example, have an advantage over those who don't, and this knowledge makes an impactful difference for people in the long run. The 4 skills utilized in financial IQ can help you become rich and make the best use of your assets, which is why you should do your best to learn them. Lesson 5. The rich invent money. After inventing the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell's company needed to expand because of the high demand for his product. Bell's small company simply couldn't handle it. He offered his company and patent to Western Union for a measly $100,000, but was rejected. His offer was called absurd. As a result, AT&T was created, and billions of dollars have been made since in the telephone industry. People often don't want to take a risk on new things, but it can be dangerous to hold on to the old and not welcome change. A common example of something that holds people back is self-doubt. It takes something gutsy and brave within us to break from this self-doubt and take the risks we need to take to accomplish our ambitions. Additionally, some people know how to beg for what they want if need be. As a teacher, Kiyosaki saw students who knew what they were doing, but who were inhibited by their self-doubt, which he hated to see. For intelligence to matter, people need to be able to act on what they know. Boldness, developing a financial IQ, and financial literacy are all worthy endeavors because they create more possibilities for you. If you can improve your financial IQ, you don't have to worry about technological or societal changes shaking you off course. With a strong financial IQ, you can be resilient in the face of change, and you can move forward. Taking time to learn about finances can make you thrive and save you from the terror of not being able to keep up. In his work, Kiyosaki has seen people clinging onto old ideas that have become a liability. Thus, he created the game lecture referred to in the introduction of the book. Cash flow is a learning tool that teaches about investing and other financial skills. In the game, the goal is to escape the rat race and move to the fast track, which players accomplish when their assets become greater than their expenses. Many people simply didn't get the game when he introduced it, and were bothered when they had to do the math and subsequently failed to accomplish what they wanted. Not everyone recognized that the game was a powerful teaching tool because they were so used to lectures in academia. However, since 1984, Kiyosaki has taught financial literacy using games and simulations because these tools allow people to self-reflect on their behaviors and provide feedback instantly. A big issue, and one that causes some players to get upset, is that people simply don't understand how to fill out financial paperwork. Those who can escape the rat race have a better and creative understanding of finances. Escapees also must know when to take a risk. The results of the game often reflect people's real-life situations. So by learning how to play the game and gaining financial education, people can more easily improve their financial situations. They don't have to remain behind other players, and you don't have to either. Lesson 6. Work to learn. Don't work for money. In 1995, Kiyosaki had an interview with a prompt and young reporter who expressed that she someday wanted to write a best-selling book like he had done. At first, she was very pleasant, but quickly, the conversation soured. Having seen her articles, Kiyosaki asked her what was keeping her from writing that book. She explained that while people liked her novels, journalism is what kept her financially afloat, and she then asked if he had any advice for her. He suggested she take a sales course, and she seemed initially put off by the suggestion. It didn't make sense to her that with a degree in English literature she would need to learn to be a salesperson. The issue here is that being talented isn't enough. It didn't matter that she was a far better writer than Kiyosaki because she wasn't willing to learn about sales. Being a master in an additional area increases people's income greatly. With sales experience, the young author might have been able to sell her book. Like the aspiring novelist, Kiyosaki's educated dad had similar philosophies, but synergy skills, or the ability to unify several skills to complete tasks, are incredibly helpful. In short, Kiyosaki doesn't believe that specialization in a niche area of your field is helpful, and thinks it's better to be multi-skilled within that area. In Kiyosaki's case, sales skills helped his first book become a success. A publisher had suggested he call the book The Economics of Education, but he knew that wouldn't capture anyone's attention. So he stuck with the title, Want to be Rich and Happy? Don't Go to School. The latter title was more controversial, which made it more appealing to TV and radio shows and helped his book attract attention. Kiyosaki made his poor dad happy by getting a stable job at Standard Oil of California, but he quit 6 months later and joined the Marine Corps. This decision was hard for his educated dad, but it made his rich dad proud. Kiyosaki says, "Job security meant everything to my educated dad. Learning meant everything to my rich dad." After the Marines, Kiyosaki decided to join Xerox to be a salesman. For a shy person like him, having to sell stuff was intimidating, but Xerox had an excellent training program and he wanted to learn. Again, his rich dad was proud of him, while his educated dad, who thought salespeople were lesser than him, was not so proud. Nevertheless, Kiyosaki worked at Xerox for 4 years to overcome his fears. He worked his way through the ranks until he became a consistent member of the top 5 salespeople at Xerox. He was no longer fearful of asking people to buy products or of being rejected, which set him up to create his own company. In 1977, he started a company that manufactured Velcro and nylon wallets. Just before his 30th birthday, he released his first shipment of products, hoping they wouldn't be a bust. He still does business around the world. Many people are not so lucky. They are in the rat race, and they spend their whole careers being close to broke. They have secure jobs, but make just enough money to keep their heads just above the water. They are like hamsters spinning endlessly on a wheel. As an example of what he's talking about, Kiyosaki quotes a line from Jerry Maguire, a Tom Cruise movie. Tom Cruise's character has been fired, and he asks if anyone wants to leave with him. One woman speaks up and says, "I'd like to, but I'm due for a promotion in 3 months." This statement speaks to the masses who are in the rat race. They keep pushing themselves to work in the hope that the next promotion will solve their financial problems. But even with raises, they are often disappointed in their situations. They go back to school to learn more, they retrain, and sometimes they even start new jobs, but none of that takes them off the ever-spinning hamster wheel. Another issue is that people's careers aren't really giving them security. Many people's pension plans are at risk or don't exist at all. 401k plans are trickier than retirement plans of the past. Further, medical care and nursing home stays add a ton of fees that many people cannot afford. Medical care is often prioritized for younger people and the wealthy. Thus, people must keep in mind these concerns and account for them as they plan for the future. They must learn financial skills, which Kiyosaki suggests learning through a second job. Many people are reluctant to take this step, but it may change their lives for the better. He also says that for those who don't want to expand their skills, unionization is important. Unions benefit those who are highly specialized. Specialists must fight to remain in their industry, because if they are kicked out, there's nowhere else for them to go. There are many specialized doctors and teachers, for example, who could benefit from unionization. Yet business owners may want to stifle union activity. Kiyosaki's rich dad, for example, pushed against the unionization of his employees. The overall point of this chapter is that you don't have to be the best at your skill to do the best. McDonald's doesn't have to make the best food. The key to its success, of course, relies somewhat on the food, but McDonald's stands out because it knows how to sell hamburgers better than many competitors. The 3 management skills Kiyosaki highlights as important are: manage your cash flow, manage systems, which includes you and your family, manage people. Sales skills can help in all areas of activity, even if it's just talking to your boss or coworkers. We all communicate and negotiate daily, so these are skills we must continue to develop throughout our lives. It's important to keep educating yourself because being a jack of all trades and educating yourself on diverse topics can make you rich. It's also important to give to others and to be a teacher. Ultimately, Kiyosaki reflects on both of his dads in different ways. One part of me is a hardcore capitalist who loves the game of money making money. The other side is a socially responsible teacher who is deeply concerned with the ever-widening gap between the haves and have-not. Overcoming obstacles. Even when people learn the skills and information needed to be financially literate, there are still several barriers that may prevent them from finding financial independence. Kiyosaki says that the top 5 obstacles people have in trying to beef up their list of assets are 1. Fear. 2. Cynicism. 3. Laziness. 4. Bad habits. 5. Arrogance. The fear of being broke is one of the most prevalent barriers. Of course, no one loves losing money, but you should realize that not a single rich person has lived without losing money. Thus, it's critical to face this fear before sacrificing all the opportunities that come your way because you're terrified. Even the wealthy still have concerns about losing their money, but handling your fear the erroneous way can be damaging. It's all right to be afraid, but your fears shouldn't mean that you run away from investing. Don't wait for tomorrow to start saving. It's best to start saving money as early as possible. That way, you'll end up with much more in the end and start creating good saving habits. You don't have to take major steps, but even starting a retirement plan can make a profound difference. Hiring a financial planner may also help alleviate some of your fears and can guide you. Some people, like Kiyosaki's poor father, avoid addressing their money fears altogether, but his rich dad advised acting like a Texan when dealing with money fears because in Texas, they win big and lose big. As his rich dad explained expertly to Kiyosaki, it's a Texan's attitude toward risk, reward, and failure I'm talking about. It's how they handle life. They live big, not like most people around here, living like roaches when it comes to money. Roaches are terrified that someone will shine a light on them. In Texas, they are glad to win, but they aren't afraid to talk about their losses either. Rich Dad encouraged risks because playing it safe doesn't allow wins. Moreover, winners don't let losses destroy them. They take adversity and use it to motivate themselves and grow. Winners don't win at everything they try, that's true. But losers can never win at anything because they don't even give winning a chance. Cynicism is another obstacle that keeps people from succeeding. There will always be a part of us that acts like Chicken Little and thinks the sky is 2 moments away from falling on us. We all doubt ourselves sometimes. Even the most successful people have doubts, but this can make us unable to complete tasks. We must be careful not to let this noise, all those distracting but unwarranted worries, consume us. During the riots in LA, gun sales went up across the United States because everyone worried that terrible things were going to happen to them. For Chicken Little-based reasons, people run away from investing because little seeds of doubt become catastrophized. No one wants to feel buyer's remorse, so many people back out of opportunities before they invest too much. But by being cynical, you will miss out on many perfectly good chances. A third obstacle is laziness. People often busy themselves to avoid tasks they do not want to face, which is the most common form of laziness. The remedy to laziness is to be a little greedy. While greed often gets a bad reputation, it can keep people from uttering words like, "I can't afford it." Those words are usually a lie, because humans can find a way to make their desires unfold with ingenuity and hard work. However, frequently, their minds will tend to laziness, as they feel tired and unable to continue as they are. They run from taking chances, and blame it on all the other stuff they must do. People become apathetic instead of asking themselves how they can adjust. Sometimes it's beneficial to take a moment and ask what's in it for you, because this is what wealthy people do. They think of what they can get out of a situation because that will motivate them not to be lazy. Use that little kernel of greed to push yourself to fulfill what is good for you, instead of avoiding what makes you anxious. However, that's not to say you should be overly greedy, because as Rich Dad said, guilt is worse than greed. Habits can dictate how our lives unfold. One day, Kiyosaki brought up the topic of habits to his rich dad. His rich dad brought up a story of a 96-pound weakling who gets hurt by a bully. Some people let the bullies kick them, while some other people use the bullies to help themselves get stronger. The weakling can use the bullies to start thinking of a plan. He thinks of how he can make extra money so that he can get to the gym to be stronger. As the weakling works out, he gets stronger and doesn't have to be afraid of the bullies. He's created new habits that allow him to thrive and defeat the bullies. Changing your habits and breaking the same old cycle you've been caught in can change your life. The final obstacle that impedes people from being rich is arrogance. When people are arrogant, they also tend to be ignorant. They puff their chests to make up for all the things that they don't know. Instead of being arrogant and insecure when you don't know something, go do some research and fill in your gaps of knowledge, because arrogance won't help you sell your ideas nearly as much as knowledge will. Getting started. Gaining wealth is not an easy task by far. Accordingly, many people wonder where in the world they should start on the journey to becoming rich. To get some perspective on the question of where to begin, Kiyosaki details his daily process, which has led him to some great results. He says that the process is like riding a bike. It takes a little unsteadiness before you can roll down the road smoothly. He believes that we all have a financial genius within us. This financial genius is often dormant, waiting for us to wake up and see that acquiring money isn't evil or too terrifying to try. Our culture has dangerous attitudes towards money that we teach to our children, who will learn that we should spend money right away when we earn it and to fear investment opportunities. Most of the Western world believes in the rat race, and thus we are doomed to work hard just to spend more money. Kiyosaki gives the following 10 steps that have been helpful for him. 1. You need a reason greater than reality. Most people would immediately say that they do want financial freedom, but the reality of having to obtain that financial freedom often stops them in their tracks. The steps seem too hard, and people are overwhelmed by the practicalities of it. To motivate yourself, make a list of wants and don't wants. Some of Kiyosaki's don't wants are to be like his parents financially and live in the suburbs. Some of his wants are the freedom to travel and control over his life. Find your own wants and don't wants and use those to encourage yourself to start the journey. It takes a long time and a lot of work, but by finding financial freedom, maybe you can get what you want most. 2. Choose daily. You choose what you get to do with your money. You can choose to be rich and start making strides towards wealth based on the financial decision you make. Many people tell themselves that wealth is too hard or undesirable, or they put off making investments until a better time. To help guide your choices, Kiyosaki gives the following input. First, invest in education. Learn skills and build your knowledge instead of using a get-rich-quick scheme. 3. Choose friends carefully. Kiyosaki explains that he has friends of all wealth levels, and all of them help him learn and grow as a person, but be cautious with the company you keep. Don't listen to the Chicken Little out there and let it sully your instincts. Don't fall for the cynicism or let friends talk you out of your investments. It's hard to resist the crowd, but it's critical to be true to yourself, even with the pressure from people you love. 4. Master a formula and then learn a new one. Be a fast learner, and when you master one area of knowledge, move on. Be careful with what you learn, because those things become who you are. Sometimes you might need a change, so don't be afraid to take in all new information and adjust your life. Kiyosaki made millions of dollars using the same formula, but after a while he moved on to new formulas, which helped him invest better. Take a financial planning class at a local college and you might unlock new doors for yourself. 5. Pay yourself first. To succeed, you need to be self-disciplined. This step is difficult to master, and it is one of the huge gaps between the poor and the rich. People with low self-esteem, for example, cannot be rich, Kiyosaki argues. There are lots of bullies in the world, and you will be pushed over, so you must be resilient to all that stress and pressure. Pay yourself before you pay anyone else. Let the creditors push you to do better as they breathe down your neck. You must be gutsy when your cash flow is lower than desired, and push back against those who try to push you around. Try to avoid debt, but be sure to always pay yourself. 6. Pay your brokers well. It pays to get good advice, so be sure to have high-quality support on your team. Lawyers, accountants, stockbrokers, etc. Paying for a good broker will get you more money in the long run, because that broker will give you advice that is well worth the money. Good brokers will also save you time, which allows you to spend more time on what you want to do and what you're good at. Always keep in mind, though, that brokers are just salespeople, so be prepared to interview them to make sure that they are a good fit for you and will work towards your interests. 7. Be an Indian giver. The power of getting something for nothing is highly beneficial. Be ready to put money into something and then rip it out when the timing suits you. Cycle it through different investments and only risk what you can afford to lose. 8. Have assets to buy luxuries. It's tempting to fall into the trap of spending your money on expenses instead of investing. But remember that when you invest and stack up the items in your asset column, you will be able to get luxuries as a result. Instead of getting a loan or using credit, try investing that money into assets that can get you more money and luxuries in the long run. 9. Feed the need for heroes. Heroes not only inspire us to be better, they show us how to be better. You can emulate them and come into your own as you learn from the greats. From childhood, we all have heroes, and it helps to have people to look up to even into adulthood. Find someone who has done what you want to do and use that to prove to yourself that you can accomplish greatness too. 10. Teach and you shall receive. Both of Kiyosaki's dads, rich and poor, were teachers. They taught him different lessons, but both instilled the importance of sharing knowledge. His rich dad gave him an education on how to be rich, but he also taught him that when you give, you get more back. When Kiyosaki teaches people who are interested in learning to what he has to share, he finds himself learning from them. Teaching creates new ideas and spreads knowledge. All you need to be is generous with what you have, Kiyosaki says, and the powers will be generous with you. Still want more? Here are some to-dos. For those who still want more information at this point, Kiyosaki shares some further suggestions in a truncated form. Search for new ideas. Don't keep doing the same things over and over again. Act. Don't just stand around waiting for what you want. Talk to people who inspire you and pick their brains. Study and take courses if you can to better yourself. Put plenty of offers on the table, even if they may be rejected, because someday you might get a yes. Go out into the world for a jog or a drive and see if you find any investments. Think big. Don't repeat history.